Welcome, everybody. I'm glad you could all be with us today. My name is Michael McQuarrie. I'm the director of the Center for Work and Democracy here at Arizona State University. My staff and I are very pleased to welcome you to sunny Tempe, Arizona for this conference. For those of you, some of you are familiar with our work, some of you are probably not that familiar with our work, but the Center for Work and Democracy was established out of a partnership between Arizona State University and United Healthcare Workers West, SEIU, to do research and provide organizational support work that aims to rebuild the voice and power of working people in the U.S. This is necessary because working people are the most likely bearers of democratic values and practices, which in a moment of historically unprecedented inequality and unfolding political oligarchy are necessary resources for sustaining individual autonomy and socioeconomic well-being. Beyond that general thesis, the Center operates with a few other core interests and principles in mind. Unions have been and remain the most effective vehicles for working people's power in the United States. But unions are not enough by themselves, especially after the decades-long institutional and employer-led assault on them. Building a society in which working people can live dignified lives requires winning battles in the workplace, but also much, much more. Tackling trillion-dollar corporations requires winning battles that extend well beyond the shop floor to communities, legislatures, and courtrooms. This work is unlikely to be undertaken by the Democratic Party, contrary to what many in the labor movement think. This is a party that mostly represents the values of professionals and the well-educated, even as it competes for votes in other constituencies. As evidence of this, I will merely point to the record of Democratic presidents and Congresses in passing much-needed labor law reform. There have been legislative proposals moved in Congress under every Democratic president since Jimmy Carter, basically my entire life, and none have passed. Ultimately then, pushing back against oligarchy requires organizations of working people and lots of organization building. It will require that the labor movement stem its long-term decline, but also that other movements of working people, such as those for racial justice and police accountability, or those for immigrants' rights, or those that defend public institutions like schools, transit system, power grids, and hospitals, or those that defend an individual's autonomy to live one's values and dissent, worship, build communities, or make decisions about one's own body are all fundamentally questions that have the highest stakes for working and poor people. Yet working and poor people have the least voice in these decisions. We live in a degenerating democracy, to borrow from the Center's board chair, Craig Calhoun, one which has many of the institutions of democratic and Republican governance, but in which democratic values are rarely sustained. The assaults on the self-determination of citizens in Jackson, Mississippi, as they sought to create new, more inclusive, and more equitable institutions of governance are one example. But so are the efforts to manipulate the institutions of governance in Minneapolis to prevent accountability for the murderous police department in that city. So are efforts to manipulate citizen ballot initiative rights once they started being successfully used to raise minimum wages rather than prevent LGBTQ people from being able to marry one another. So are efforts to use anti-terrorism laws on peaceful protesters against the construction of a training facility for the repression of working and poor people in Atlanta, Georgia. But all of this exists in a context where workplaces incubate new practices of surveillance, manipulation, exploitation, and repression. Finding a way out will require organization and mobilization. It will require imagination. We need to not only rebuild unions, we need to incubate and build out a solidarity economy where success is measured in terms of general well-being rather than the amount of dollars that have been exchanged. We need to experiment with new organizational models for realizing these goals. Doing all of this requires waging uphill legal and institutional battles, boots on the ground work, and these in turn require resources. People I used to work with used to say that there are basically two kinds of resources that matter: organized people and organized money. We, and this includes the Center for Work and Democracy itself, we're usually pretty short on organized money, which means that we make up for it with organized people. With that in mind, I hope you come to this conference to not only listen, talk, and learn, but explore possibilities for organization and collaboration. Perhaps with the Center for Work and Democracy, but more importantly with each other. Keep an eye out for opportunities to try something new, consider new possibilities, or explore ways that you can support people doing good work. We at the Center for Work and Democracy hope that you will leave here perhaps learning something new, but also having met some new people that are worth learning from, collaborating with, or supporting. So since its founding, the Center for Work and Democracy has been honing its edge, I like to say. It probably isn't that sharp yet, but it's getting there, in the midst of a pandemic and an uprising. Nonetheless, we've developed practices for conducting research and also being good allies. We pride ourselves on being small but good. The past year, we've been boots on the ground on Kaiser picket lines and in George Floyd Square. Our staff and board have been to protests and union executive board meetings. We've done house visits, press conferences, and interviews to support the building of organizations of working people or support those organizations in their struggles. While doing that, we continue to produce academic research, public-facing writing, and now, thanks to our associate director, Ben Fong, a podcast on the CIO's organization in the 30s. We can do all this better than we're doing now, and we will find our way to that goal. We don't want to build a research empire, but we do want to be impactful by picking the right issues, the right partners, and the right way to go about doing our business. We invite all of you here to talk with us, work with us, and explore possibilities with us. Before we get started on the regular program and our first panel, I do want to introduce you to some people at the Center for Work and Democracy. You will see these people around. Most of them will not spend much time on stage. But they are basically what makes our goal of being small but good possible. So the first person that I'd like to introduce to all of you is somebody that you've come to know well through email, and that is Muriel Peyrado, who's in the back over there. All of you know Muriel as somebody who does coordination for events, because she helped arrange her travel, among other things. But she's also a researcher, so she's the project coordinator on our George Floyd Square project, which is something she hasn't been able to do for 2 months now, and probably looking forward to getting back to that work. She's also the longest tenured staff member at the Center for Work and Democracy. So our first year of existence, it's basically me and Muriel. Like Muriel, Maria Esch started out as a student worker while she was working on her master's degree and is now a full-time staffer who does research on a number of projects. She's in the back standing with Muriel. Maria manages our communications and recently helped coordinate the production of the Twin Flames exhibit at the ASU Museum, which we'll be visiting later this afternoon. Ben Case is the center's postdoctoral research scholar. Ben is where? Ben's right up here. Ben is a sociologist, an activist, and an exceptional researcher and writer. Ben writes on protests and ballot initiative politics and is currently doing research on our new Moral Economies project. Ashley Cooper, who is going to be chairing our first panel. Where's Ashley? Right up here. She recently received her PhD from the Justice Studies program at ASU, which was earned for her exceptional research and organizational work in a local women's prison. Like most of our researchers, Ashley also has considerable organizing experience to bring to the table, and that helps us do our research more effectively, I think. Carolyn Forbes here. Is Carolyn Forbes here? Right here, Carolyn Forbes. Carolyn has been a godsend as the center's new assistant director and has considerably smoothed the center's sometimes fractious relationship with our university hosts, and for that we are very grateful. That's one of her many tasks at the center. Scott Jenkins is right here. Scott Jenkins is the center's current activist in residence, which is a program we use to give activists some time to reflect and research to enable them to do their better work going forward. It's also an opportunity for us to be in direct contact with people who are on the ground doing this work day to day, which we think considerably improves the quality of our work. He's our second activist in residence. Janelle Austin, who you will all meet later today, was our first. Scott is an organizer with Teamsters for a Democratic Union and helped lead their strike preparation efforts last year, which helped secure a historic contract for 300,000 UPS workers. I think many people in the room know the center's associate director, Ben Fong. There's Ben. Ben's right up here. Ben's also been with the center since its founding. He is a faculty member in the Barrett Honors College. Ben's initiative, curiosity, organizational skill, and creativity have been indispensable to the center's ability to juggle its many projects. Anything we produce has probably had Ben's hands on it at some point, and we hope that you all listen to his podcast, which is currently being released week by week on the organization of the CIO in the 1930s. I want to make a quick shout out to Stephen Wolf, who's visiting us from Minneapolis. Where's Stephen? Stephen Wolf, right up here. Stephen recently completed his PhD in sociology at the University of Minnesota. Stephen works with us as a contract researcher, but has been a delight to work with on our pending report on the police brutality tax that citizens pay in Minneapolis. Finally, if you're a student worker or were a student worker at the Center for Work and Democracy, please stand up. Or if you're in the hallway, please come in for a second. They're all outside. We've worked with a number of student workers here at ASU. We found them all to be delightful people to work with. We really appreciate their engagement and support of the center. Really nothing that we do would be possible without all of them. Sam is here. I see Ian here. Kayla's probably out front. Yeah, okay, so we have a number of student workers here, and we generally work with about 8 or 10 at a time, and they do invaluable work that we hope prepares them for their future careers. So while you're here, say hello to center staff. We'd really not be able to do our work at all without them, and I very much appreciate all their work. So finally, by way of introduction, for the next 2 days, we're going to be having conversations that will help frame our work for the next year. We're concerned with two kinds of organizations for working people at this conference. Today, we will be thinking about organizational and institutional developments that can further the goal of building power and voice for working people through mechanisms like mutual aid, public banking, and most importantly, worker cooperatives. The center is actively involved in cooperative building efforts here in Arizona, where we support the work of our allies with Healthcare Rising Arizona and United Healthcare Workers West SEIU. But we will also be hearing about cooperative building efforts in Jackson, Mississippi, and New York City. Tomorrow we'll be discussing one of the most pressing and difficult problems for ensuring the voice and power of working people, and that is the decline of labor unions. Fundamentally, merely stemming the decline requires organizing millions of new union members. This is not just a question of how to run campaigns or the issues to be used for mobilization. It is a question of resources, capacity, and institutional constraints. While there are many promising efforts underway to solve this problem, and we will hear from many people who are trying to think this through, this is not a problem that we are close to solving, and unfortunately far too much discussion of the labor movement is tactical in our view rather than strategic, and that is something that we would like to change. Finally, before we get started, I want to thank all of you for being here with us. This is our largest event yet, but I don't think we want to break this record, to be honest. We want these events to enable deeper discussion, not only on panels, but away from them. And we want all of you to have opportunities to meet each other and explore these questions yourselves. I hope you enjoy the conference. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ashley Cooper and our first panel, who I believe will be coming up to the stage now. Thank you.